Hi, Majenko. Right. Now I've got some IO. So a little too far. So this was a firewall at a site that I put in because they had a short rack. And a giveaway in its age, apart from a hard disk, is this is an Intel board. This is an Intel Atom desktop board. Hi Swamp. So, yeah, it's one of those. How long ago has it been since Intel would sell you a board? I have two of these. One is the one with the failed Pico PSU. This one, as you can see, is a full flex, so I haven't got a problem. It's missing the I/O shield, and I've got a feeling that the I/O shield that came with it wouldn't fit in this case. You can see we've got an expansion slot down here. On the other one, that has a second Intel NIC with the port on an expansion slot. So this one was configured as a firewall, and I've obviously taken the NIC out. I did have a twin NIC. This probably was a triple. Now, if I remember, this is a 1 gig, and I'm hoping it will take this Corsair stick I've found, because this is a 4 gig. So it's interesting. This has got the wrong audio. There we go. We should have the audio back. This one, I don't think Intel ever did one with a 12-volt input, but Jetway did, as we've seen on with one with Majenko's got. This one's annoying in it has DVI and VGA and the pads for HDMI, but no actual HDMI port. So add some power in. Well, it likes this dim because it's booted. Why this is an F2? Right, there we go. So we got 4 gig. That's good. Always nice to find a working dim. Time's off a bit. It's close enough. Okay. Looks good to me. Oh, why hasn't that come up? Ah, I forgot. I don't have to select VGA because I'm going through the Extron. Duh. This has to be one of the most wasteful USB installs I do. It's a 32 gig stick with the net installer on it, which is like 600 meg. And I can't spell. I don't think I've got anything lower than 8 at the moment either, but I've mostly got 16s, 32s and biggers. So you end up in that silly situation of, I need the smallest stick possible. Nah, that'll do. I'm just going to nuke the disk. I have some small sticks, but they're things like they're stuck in old Blu-ray players. I really should power those up and see if there's any updates for them or if they've taken the site down. I haven't gone for smaller sticks, Majenko, because of course one of the problems I've got in buying off eBay is I want a VAT receipt, so I tend to buy multi-packs of SanDiscs, and like one triple pack of 16 gigs is cheaper than most places are selling a single stick for, so you know. Majenko would like this board. I mean, the D2700 is a dual core hyperthreader, so you've got 4 threads, but it's also got twin onboard hardware serial ports. They're just not broken out on the rear panel. That's what the green headers are. That's COM2, that's COM1. I used to use this case, not this exact one, but this model, with another machine, and I had to put black tape over it because the hard disk LED is a blue LED, and it lights up literally half the house at night. It shines from the rack, out the computer room door, and the glow on the wall is so bright you can actually see it from the main bedroom, even though it's a right angle bend to get out the door, so you can be in bed seeing stuff flickering through the door, and it's the wall at the other end of the landing. So I ended up having to cheat and put a piece of electrician's tape across it just to cut down on the amount of light getting out. Oh, this also has an S-diff out as well, just for fun. It's not for... The problem isn't that blue LEDs were invented. It's that once they were, everyone thought they were the ultimate thing to stick on everything. I don't need my kettle to light up the water blue. I can see the level indicator on the side without that. But apparently, no, it's got to be lit up blue. Let's tweak that a little. It's weird how long this is taking to install because the other machine with one of these has a SATA SSD, and as you can imagine, it installs a lot quicker. This case has an advantage, however, it's got USB on the front, which is that one. That yellow header is also another set of USBs, so there's 2 spare USBs on the board. There's also one. I've got to remember what this is labelled. But there's a brown header, which if I remember is also something USB. But I can't remember what it is for the life of me. or is that the USB and the yellow's the front panel audio? Because as you can imagine, this thing does not have front panel audio. I suppose one of the advantages, Majenko, of phosphor excited LEDs in any colour is you can end up with multiple colours that all have the same power requirements, as as opposed to the gallium phosphide ones where the red was the lowest, if I remember, and as you went to the different colours, you needed different resistors to balance things out. You can tell when I've been watching too much Big Clive is when I've got things like forward voltages of LEDs stuck in my head. The biggest problem with putting this back together, apart from the fact I'll have to find a blanking plate, ignoring the gaping hole in the other side where the I/O panel is when I've taken the lid off this, I don't know what I've done with the screws. So I'm going to have to find some screws that fit it. But what was also funny about this from the two boards is you can tell which one I was in use last. This one booted up fine. The other one, CMOS battery flat. So it's like, which one do I think's been stood up in the living room for the longest? One of the fun things about this is the LED panel on this has power, green, hard drive, blue, NIC 1, 2 and 3, which I don't know what the colours are because I've never hooked them up, and a message stroke warning, which I think is this one, alarm LED. I've never had a board to put in these that has a status light for the LED, so I have never connected any of them up, but it's interesting it comes with 3. Yeah, 2 I could understand. I just feel like they wanted to put 6 LEDs on it to make, I don't know, the board easier, the connector easier, something silly like that. What's your frying, Swarm? I don't know, Majenko. I quite like a nice sauté potato. That's fried. One of the cafes at the front here, if you order a breakfast, in fact it's the reason I go there, it is a choice between hash browns and sauté potatoes for your potato option on the breakfast. I have a feeling that this connection is faster than this machine technically can process. The weirdest breakfast I had like that was when I was doing some work in Bradford, and I was a bit early, so I called in at the Morrison's for breakfast. And it hadn't occurred to me the sausages would be different. This machine needs an update. There's a new kernel package, but I have a feeling that installing that while streaming would be a bad move. Mostly it would be. Well, it demands to reboot afterwards. I'm trying to work out what to do for a power supply in the other one. The other one's a 1.5 U case, maybe 2U. But when I got it, it had a standard ATX power supply at the front, and there's a filter C14 on the back going to a C13 fly lead. So you put the PSU at the front, connect the power in the back, and then there's the lead connects to PSU. So it actually sits in front of the motherboard at the front of the case, and then to the side is 5.25 and a 3.5 inch bays with drives in them. So I put a 12 volt 10 amp power supply in there, firing over to the Pico PSU on the board. And I haven't checked if it's the 12 volt that's the fault or the Pico, but it is working with a nice cheap, well, a cheap power supply I got off Amazon. The problem is, like almost all modern power supplies, the fan is on the base, which in that case means that the fan is shoved right up against the top cover of a machine when you put the lid on. So there's no airflow. So I need to find a different solution to that. Plus the power leads for it aren't actually quite long enough to get from the front to the socket. We're about 2 centimeters too short. But I'm trying to think of the best sort of power supply to replace it with, because of course I need something that can push air through itself, and hardly anyone makes that style of PSU anymore because bluntly they're loud. You know, it's much better to have a 120mm fan on the top, or 140mm fan on the top, rather than an 80 on the back trying to do the same cooling, which is great as long as you're putting it in a case that has some space above or below the power supply. I might end up with another, if I could get a flex one like this, that might be my best bet, because it's not as if this uses a huge amount of power. I mean, this is rated at what, 230 combined watts. Yeah, 10 amps on the 3.3, 18 amps on the 5, 15 amps on the 180. This is a dual core Atom D series. The hard drive's probably pulling more power at spin up than the board is. I do like the drive mount on this, the fact they actually give you a removable plate so you can deal with it out of the case rather than trying to manoeuvre the case. It's a D2700. It's a 3.16 dual core hyper threading. And like I said, I've got two of these, but unlike yours with the Jetway, this is a genuine Intel desktop board. It actually has the Intel logo under the SODIMM slots. I do have some others, mostly 330s, which are, I think they're dual core, and I think they're hyper threading too, although they might not be. But that's what over here is running the old Preside, which is my named machine, which I really need to replace. In fact, it might end up migrating over to this one. But like I said, both of these have just been sitting around for years. I have a lot of stuff that has just been sitting around that's been brought in from the cars after it's done something. I put it down and it's just sat there, and I just haven't had a reason to poke at them. I might have to go and get a bigger drink. The half litre of lemonade is going down quite quickly. Yeah, so that's a mini PCIe slot. So it's possible to put quite quick upgrades in there. Like I said, I've got a single and a dual Intel gigabit card that goes in there, and then it has 2 or 4 fly leads to take you over to the actual networking jacks. The reason for 2 fly leads is because the status LEDs are on the jacks. So one is Ethernet and one is status cabling. So you need 2 cables for each port. But they were quite useful because I could take one of these and turn it into a 2 or 3 port machine at full speeds without bugging about with different. I mean, this one's not so bad because it's got a PCI slot. So, you know, you're quite happy up to like gigabit speeds through that. But this one was more useful because you didn't have to worry about the size of the card. You know, the card is a full length, so what's that, 5cm mini PCIe, and it either has 1 or 2 Intel controllers on it. So, and of course, I don't have any compatibility issues with like pfSense if I'm using Intel NICs. Yeah, this one's fully 64-bit compatible. SSE 3, I think. So it's not a bad little processor. I can't remember what the actual TDP of it is. Hold on. .13 gigahertz. There we go. 10 watts. 1 meg cache. Claims 4 gig maximum memory, but claims 8 SATA ports, which is right because we've got 2 on the board and 2 sets on the back. no virtualization tweaks, but you wouldn't really expect that so much in a 2011 Atom. I forgot to note which name it was. Cedar View was this family. I mean, you had an advantage over me, Majenko, in yours is an easier one to find a power supply for. Now, being external does make life a little easier if you're constrained by the case design. I actually have a Lenovo machine with an Atom board, and to cut the costs on it, guess what Lenovo did with the power supply? More than that, Majenko, it's the Lenovo square pin ThinkPad power supply. So on the board is the triple connector, so inner, outer, and center pin for an intelligent ThinkPad power supply. But it's still supplied in the standard Lenovo mini tower case. So above the motherboard is a big blanking plate over the ATX hole and a big space up there, and that's it. So there's a huge amount of empty space in that case. Which actually was advantageous to me because I pinched the power supply to use for something else. I've got spares now, but at the time it was like, whoop, I'll just nip that 45 watt Lenovo power supply. But I need to come up with use for that one. That one doesn't have a PCI slot, but it has the pads for it. So the thought of cleaning out all the vias, well, I say the vias, the holes, and putting an actual expansion slot in there. Well, yeah, this one they didn't even bother putting it in a different case. They literally, there is just a ATX sized blanking plate screwed in with the standard 4 ATX PSU mounting screws. It'd be fun actually to take a machine like that and put multiple systems in it, because there's so much room. I mean, it's a standard ATX, multiple drive bays, and because the PC board self-contained, it's like, well, you could cut some holes in the PSU expansion slot and mount a couple of pies on it. In fact, you could probably, if you put them vertically, you could probably put 4 pies in a row. Do you want 3.14 slices? Or are you just turning into Weeble and Bob? Pie. Ah, so you want serial pies instead of parallel pies. I don't have pies at the moment. I normally get pies at weekend. You've seen the picture of the that I taunted Ben with for the pie, haven't you? This is my local market, and we have a pie stall because it's north. If you don't have a pie stall in your market, you're probably going to lose having a market. This is just the main section. The fruit pies are mostly right at the far right side, and also around the corner there's a second smaller fridge display unit. So now you really are getting into Weeble and Bob territory. Pieception, yep. You know what would happen if you had a pie like that, though, don't you, Majenko? You'd have Ben at your door with puppy dog eyes going, "Did someone say pie?" One of the things I did like about these boards is the fact the board is fanless. So when the lid's on, we've got these two blowing across and out the back. Because all the all the machines I've had with faults that I've used for PF Sense, it's been the fan on the low profile power supply that's gone. And getting hold of them is an absolute nightmare. I've got one of them here and one out on site. They're Celeron J1900s. They've got 6 Intel gigabit NICs on board. But they have a fan that is... The heatsink is about a centimetre deep with the cowling on it. And it's semicircular on one end where the fan mounts, and that blows down, and that directs the air sideways across the heatsink, which sticks up through the cowl and out the end. But even with the part number of the fan, you can't get a replacement, because it turns out the spec of the fan doesn't include the mount. And this particular fan is mounted with 3 screws that go into support bars, really, that are in a Y shape. And so you've got the support, the housing with the magnet. With the coils, and then the fan with the magnet in it, and on the bearing on the top. Turns out those support bars in the Y layout come in 2 lengths, and the part number will only buy you the short ones, which means it doesn't line up with the holes to screw it down to. So after a few years, these things have overheated a bit. The machines are actually fine, but can I find a replacement fan? I've bought 3 replacement fans over the years, and they've all got the wrong mounting holes, and it's starting to bug me. Especially when the pictures of them show them having the correct length mounts, and then it turns up with the short mounts, and it's like, give me the right thing, then I could put this back into use. Because I can't see any particular use for a 6-port machine with a serial console, a VGA console, 2 USB ports. My best one with twin-axe Magenco was we moved a company into a building that had twin-axe cabling. We were reconditioning the Cat5 that was installed, but the twin-axe stuck so far off the wall. We just went round with a hammer and literally were smashing the connectors off the wall and then cutting them just to get the space back. Wonder what that bang was. That would do it. Cleaning company's van just slamming the doors outside. Hi, Daft Punkle. I'm just watching what this guy's doing, because he's gone round the front, and I'm hoping he keeps on going, because I'm not paying anyone to clean my windows. This is why I get to make musical jokes, because my mum decided to take up the ukulele at one point. And I have run out of George Formby jokes now. Let's get in it. It wasn't so much he played for banjolele, Majenko. He invented the banjolele. Because we were talking before amplification in venues, and the uke wasn't powerful enough, so he put a banjo resonator onto a ukulele, and that's where the banjolele actually comes from. So yes, technically he does play it, but he was a uke player. That's why in the films he plays a uke, because amplification isn't a problem when you're recording the sound. So the banjolele was really for live performances where there wasn't a microphone and amplifier system, which, let's face it, as I said, were pretty much all of them at the time. Yes, basically, yes. Yes, you can blame him for Mr. B. My favourite one like that has to be the Fighting Trousers by Professor Elemental, where he is responding to Mr. B. I've got video producers and fans who adore me. You've got a granddad's moustache and a ukulele. Reminds me, I had an email from Professor Elemental about the latest updates this morning, so... Have you seen both versions of I'm British, Majenko? Yes. There's the original one, which is on YouTube and is a lot easier to find, which is the apology for everything Britain's doing. The second one came out in 2016, and it's after the Brexit referendum, and it's a even further apology for Britain being complete arseholes. Oh, if I remember, this takes a while the first time. That clicking is annoying me. I'm going to check what it is. Well, we've got a graphical subsystem. That's a good start. The funny thing is that with the keyboard on top, this is actually blowing air over the CPU quite nicely. And I found the fault with my RDP problem, Majenko. No, it's even simpler than that. You have to put your user in the XRDP group, uncome out this line, and change the stock group from root to XRDP. And then it can create the session properly, and I can use XRDP with straight Xorg. So it bypasses me having to use XVNC, so that side of it still isn't working, but at least I can get into it. So after I found that and fixed it on Meteor over here, I celebrated by moving 30,000 emails out of my live mailboxes into my archive. Because the problem was you could bring up an RDP session, you'd get basically an XDM login, and it didn't matter what option you selected. When you entered username and password, it would sit there. With Xorg inputs, it would use it would come back and say it was locating you on session 10, couldn't connect to session, bump, and dump you straight back to the login page. Yeah, but I don't drink Majenko, so the best I'm going to do is have a Coke. Now for the fun of switching modes. Because this keyboard needs FN to use F1. So Control-Alt F1 requires that. I can't type. There we go. Right. Better? Right. Shouldn't be too much on this. No, didn't think so. That's good. There we go. So it probably doesn't have anything like seal heat on it. Wonder what they think is a difference. Okay, so it's got a shortcut for mail reader, but you need to install your own MUA. What do they put in as that? Is that just going to call Firefox? Yeah, I thought so. Well, it would be worried if it wasn't thoroughly eaten, Swarm. I thought that was more of a G-pin thing, Majenko. So we're using what? Just under 800 meg. Biggest delay on this is going to be the hard drive. Go on, let's see how bad this can actually do. Haven't got any audio hooked up. But, wonder which one it is. See if it manages it. But of course, YouTube doesn't work. Got to love that one. You need to sign in to check you're not a bot because you're coming out of a Hurricane Electric IPv6 address. Says something when most of your RAM is just a web browser. Interesting that Xsane is part of the default install. That seems quite specific. I don't know if I've actually got the back end. I'm going to take that as a note. But, right. These do make quite a nice little machine. Needs a bit of a clean in places, but it's only a little bit of dust. All that does is do the equivalent of SMB:// for this sort of connection. So if it doesn't work in the address bar, it's not going to work anywhere else, because it's going to just basically moan that I haven't got the rest of Samba basically in. So, and I can't be bothered because I don't use that facility enough. But so if I angle that up a little, so here's the back of this one. So as you can see, it's a tight bay and the ATX back shield just wouldn't fit. So it has external locks for PCI cards. The only annoying thing is that I was going to use the compact keyboard on it, but the compact has twin PS2 ports, one for the trackball, one for the keyboard, and this only has a single PS2 port that is either keyboard or mouse. So you can see the spot where the HDMI connection is meant to go down here, so this is meant to be that long. But for the price I paid for them, I don't think they're a bad board. But now I have to track down 4 countersunk screws. But hold the actual lid on, and it's amazing how heavy this actually is. This is actually heavier than the E3 1220 V6 Xeon super micro servers I got, and I think it's this bottom casing, because I've got a feeling this one's all steel and quite a lot of the super micro one is aluminium. Yes, so I'll have to dig out screws for this and actually put it back together properly. Well, to be fair, Swart, by the time you got to this age of machine, the fact you had 4 USB ports was normally more than enough to actually compensate. Yeah, it's like the PS2 really is a just in case. A bit like the parallel. The 2 serial ports I can more understand. But as you can see, they didn't break any of the serial ports out on the back panel. They're just headers. But at least being an Intel board, you do sort of know which connector it's going to be out of the two, because strange enough, it's going to be the Intel wired one. Clean the dust out of the power supply, but as you can see, it's a very compact machine in comparison. Yeah, but by this point, Swarm, that was quite a specific need. The fact that it was on what they were selling as a desktop board, I think it's more down to the fact that they were putting that WinBond Super I/O chip on there, and it was more the case of like, yeah, we got the ports. Yeah, hence 2 serial, 1 parallel, PS2. Isn't it less about the responsiveness, but more the N key rollover issue, that PS2 pretty much doesn't have a rollover limit on on multiple keys, whereas PS2 has a limit on how much USB has a limit on how much it sends before there's a pause, and then it sends the next set or something like that. Yeah, so Twitch, not the gaming streaming type, but Twitch game players who need that absolute I pressed a button, I clicked a mouse, and it was received at the machine immediately. Yeah, that's not my sort of gameplay. It's my sort of game. It's just not the sort of way I play it. I still have the fun like that of the insults from playing Warzone. People don't like it when someone headshots you and it tells you that you were killed by Chloe. I have been called multiple insults in multiple languages. I think that one's for cabling. I was trying to remember why there's a cable tie through the bottom, and it's got to be me, because it's the same colour as all the other cable ties that I know I put in here. This is such a horrible case for actually opening, because it is literally a guillotine steel case. So the rear edge is annoyingly sharp. The one that always used to get me, Swarm, there was a player of Warzone when I was playing it, who, I don't know their medical history, but they didn't have decent or any use of their hands, so they played Warzone with their feet, and they were such a better player than I was. I don't have ones this small, I'm afraid, Majenko. I do have a spare of the bigger one. Yeah, Swarm, he was playing mouse on with one foot and WDSA with the other foot. Yeah, it was the PSU ones. The red cable ties are mine, which is why I knew that was mine. So, hi Peter. The only spare ATX cases I've got of the other one of these boards is in, which is it's that length, and it's like a 2U. And one of the problems is they have a foam filter at the front, and of course the foam is disintegrating. And I found that out by having to run off and grab a Hoover and clean up a mess, because it's got to that point where if you touch the foam, it just turns into dust. So the cases were second hand when I got them. This one is weird because this is one I bought. This is probably from X Case. Are they still going? That would be a note. X Case used to be a supplier of cases. Literally, that's all they did. Everything from micro ATX, gamer cases, up to 1 to 4U server cases, storage system cases, and they were based in Milton Keynes. So, as I had a friend in Milton Keynes, we'd often just go and pick up. If we needed 10 cases, we didn't pay shipping. We just nipped down to visit a friend and pick up 10 cases as we went. But when you go to their domain, you get a easy space hosting page. So I've got a feeling that they are not abound anymore. So, which is sort of understandable, because let's face it, the market for computer cases isn't what it used to be, because most people bite off. Lin ITX, yep. Yeah, I used to use Lin and Mini ITX, but I didn't tend to use them for cases. Because of the price, I used them for the boards. This is probably a Lin ITX supplied board, so I get the boards from them and cases from elsewhere. So the cheaper cases too tend to be quite heavy. So. But like I said, the other one I've got is 19-inch, 1.5 or 2U, but quite a bit longer because it's designed to handle the power supply internally. Like I said, I've got a slight problem in the power supply of that one, but I actually have two of those. I have one that's got the Mini ITX in it, and another that I've stripped the board out of and not redone. My other short ones are 4U, which I can see down there, which is another second-hand one. There's a company in Hull called Solwise who are a comms specialist. If you want specialist Wi-Fi gear, they'll supply it. But in the old days, they used to supply even more. They were one of the biggest suppliers of home plug in this country, with the advantage that they would do the weird stuff that no one else was selling. They stopped doing home plug when you can literally go into Sainsbury's and buy it off the shelf. But they used to do not just standard home plug, but they also did home plug over twisted pair instead of home plug over mains. So if you had a piece of Cat5 or a telephone cable, you could run 100 to a gigabit link 200, 300 meters by using one of the twisted pair units. It was, it was quite useful. But they were moving offices, and they had two old servers, and they gave us some, and we stripped the cases out and reused them. And one of them's still down here, so that's got to be... I've got to have had that 20 years. And it was second-hand from them. They were retiring it to put in better servers when I grabbed it, and it saved them having to lug it to the new office to throw it away. So, why not take it? But like I said, it's still sat down here. Right. Let's see if anything else is calling on my time yet. Not yet. Right, well, thank you everyone for joining me. I'll have to think of a use for this now. I've actually been thinking about modifying one of the waste 1U cases to hold a couple of pies, and using it to do things like pie hole, and just racking power supplies and pies inside a cheap, second-hand throwaway 1U case. probably one that used to be a switch. I can see me having to go a bit bad obsession on it, you know, do an impression of Nick with a grinder and a slitting disc, and cut vents in the back, because let's face it, I mean, I could put it on the front, because if it's an old switch, it's going to have where the network ports were on the front, so. But anyway, so thank you everyone for coming along, and like I said, I've got to think of a use for this now, so that's often harder than doing the work, isn't it? Take care.